Okay, now I don't know any Aboriginal stories. Who knows a few, but I don't. So I'm going to tell you a story from the Pacific Northwest of Canada, from First Nations people called the Haida. And the Haida Nation has been around a few thousand years. And this is a myth, but of course, why do we'll move up a ship. Why do older civilizations create myths? There's the guys' question.
To teach you a lesson.
Teach you a lesson, that's good. Excellent. What else? That's true, they do. Scare people into behaving.
Yeah.
That's good. Anybody else got any ideas about why they create myths? Well, think about it. I don't know how much ancient history you studied when you studied the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, or the Romans, or the Greeks. They all had gods, right? If you see all the movies they make these days, the Vikings, same thing. They all had gods, and the gods had certain areas of responsibility. So like Neptune was a god of sea, right? So anything that happened in the sea, that was Neptune who did that. They didn't have to explain the science because they didn't necessarily understand the science. And all the science that we know is very, very recent in human development. So because of that, in the old days, in the pre-science days, if you like, different peoples made up different myths to explain things, okay? And so people didn't understand the sun 5,000 years ago, so what did they do? They created the sun god, right? They said they didn't understand about planets and anything else, or the solar system or the suns, so they created the sun god. And the sun god was the sun, and he went to bed every night, and the moon goddess came up and looked after the earth at night. That was just their way of explaining things. So the Haida people, they had a series of myths and stories which explain how the earth was created and all of the strange things that happened on the earth, and how those were the reason for things happening. Now, one of the creatures was their main creature that made everything. It was a creature called Raven. And Raven is right at the top of all of the legends and myths of the Haida people and many of the coastal Salish people in northwest of Canada. So, for example, when the Earth was first made, it span around so fast that people fell off it. Wow! It did. So Raven fixed that because he figured it out. So he got a lump of ice and stuck it on the North Pole, a lump of ice and stuck it on the South Pole, and that slowed everything down so nobody fell off anymore. See? That's how Raven made the Earth habitable. So all sorts of stories like that exist in Haida mythology. Now here's one which I like a lot, so I tell it. And it's relevant to mangroves and coastal areas. It's about the tides, and you guys know how tides are created, right? Yeah. But we know they're created by gravity and the moon and all that stuff. But the Haida people didn't know that. So they made a story about how Raven made the tides, and this is a story. So one day, Raven was flying down the coastline, looking down into the ocean, and he looked at all the creatures in the ocean, the fish and the shellfish, the clams and the crabs, swimming around doing their thing, and he just was very upset because he was hungry. He hadn't eaten for weeks and weeks, and neither had the people. And everyone was really, really, really hungry because the caribou and everything had left, and they didn't know what to eat. So as he was looking down into the ocean, he thought, if only my people could get hold of all those fish and clams and shellfish and stuff, we wouldn't be hungry anymore. But we can't get them because they're covered in water. Oh, I don't know what we're going to do. As he flew down the coastline, in the distance, he saw what looked like a huge man. And as he flew closer, he saw it was the biggest man he'd ever seen. This man was ginormous. Well, Raven was a very curious boy. So he flew down in front of the man and said, "Hey, big man, you're the biggest man I ever saw. You know what? I have a problem. Why are you sitting on the edge of the sea like that? Why are you just sitting there? It makes no sense to me." "Well," said the big man, "I'm sitting on a hole." "You're sitting on a hole?" I get off the hole, all the ocean will pour into it. Well, Raven had an idea. Now, Raven was the trickster. He was called the trickster, you know what that is, right? Some of the tricks everybody knows. So he says, hey, big man, see that headland just over there? Just over the other side of that headland, there were all these fish and clams and crabs and stuff lying on the seafloor, and I ate them all. Fantastic feast, it was wonderful. That's not possible, said the big man. And he got up to see over the headland. And quick as a flash, Raven grabbed 2 sharp rocks, stuck them on the edge of the hole. So when the big man went to sit down again, he couldn't, because the rocks were sticking into his bum. Ow! Whoa! Woo! 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 Said Raven, look you! Look at you! And he flew up and he looked down, and there was the ocean all pouring into the hole. And then he flew back up the shoreline. And he looked down, and there were all the creatures just lying on the ocean floor. He thought, boy, we're going to collect all those creatures, and boy, we're going to eat them, get the people together, we'll cook them up, have a big feast and a powwow. And boy, I can't wait to get them. So sure enough, when he got back, he took the people out, they gathered all the fish, shellfish, clams and stuff, cooked them all up, and had a big feast and a powwow. And they ate, and they ate, and they ate, until they couldn't eat anymore. Just like this. Raven sitting there thinking, boy, that's the best feast I can ever remember having. But then he had a thought. Oh boy. I wonder about that big man. He felt sort of guilty. I better go check it out, see how he's doing. So he flew up into the air much slower this time. As he flew down the shoreline, he looked down, and all the creatures lying on the ocean floor. And he thought, oh man, we're never ever going to be hungry again. Anytime we're hungry, we can just go down there and gather up the food, cook it up and eat it. Oh, what a feast. Well, sure enough, there in the distance was a big man, and he was so huge, he had not been able to turn around and move the rocks, and the ocean was still pouring into the hole, and he was mad. Hey, Raven, get down here! Oh, I fooled you! Me and the people, we went out, and we got all the food we could imagine. Boy, we ate it, and we ate it, and we ate everything. And you know what? We're never going to be hungry again. Because anytime we get hungry, we can just go out there and eat ourselves silly. Boy, am I ever smart. Well, that's all right. But what about all those creatures out there? They need that water. They need that water to swim around in and hang out and eat and have families and stuff, you know? And if they can't have their water, they're all gonna die. Uh-oh. Raven, he's got a point. How are we gonna fix this? Tell you what, big man, I'm going to make you a deal. What kind of deal? I don't trust deals. Well, said Raven, this is a deal. I will take those rocks away from the hole, and you can sit down, and the water will come back in, the sea will come back in, and all the creatures will have lots of water to swim around in, hang out, have babies and stuff, okay? But from now and forevermore, twice a day, you got to get off the hole so the water can go in it, and my people can go out and catch all the food they want to eat. But twice a day, from now and forevermore, you have to get back on the hole again so the sea can come in and all the creatures can live and have families and hang out and stuff, okay? Okay, said the big man. You got a deal like I don't got much choice, do I? No, you don't, said Raven. Whipped out the rocks, the big man sat down, and in came the ocean. And all the creatures were happy because they had water to swim around in, hang out, have babies and eat and stuff. And from that day till this, and from evermore, twice a day, the big man gets off the hole, and the tides go down. And twice a day, he gets back on the hole again, and the tides come in. See, that's the story. Still doing it. That big man's still out there up in the Arctic, sitting on